Mrs. Boan, let's get started with, would you mind sharing your faith and really how did you come to your faith in Christ?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I'm from a small town in South Central Kansas. And as I think back on my life, I would probably describe that part of my life as just a spiritual desert. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My parents did go to church, but there was no kind of active relationship with the Lord, no spiritual mentorship or anything like that. But what they did do was once a summer, they would send me over to a camp in the Ozarks called Kanakuk. Mm-hmm. And so I got sent there starting in sixth grade. And it was mind-blowing for me to be in a place where I was seen and loved and also spoken to with truth. And I will tell you, like, I'd be there two weeks every summer, and I would spend the rest of the 50 weeks each year just counting down the days until I could get back to that place where I could hear more about Jesus. My dad was a business owner. He was an obstetrician. And so our family practice was rural healthcare. And so he was super, he worked a ton, and wasn't able to just be present in my life. And what ended up happening, unfortunately for me, was just that in that void, I got taken over by other things, that were very painful for me. And so it was about my junior year at Kanakuk when I finally was able to kind of surrender my whole life to the Lord and just put him at the center of it and kind of release the role that I was really craving for my dad to play in my life and replace that with my Heavenly Father. And so really my story is just, for me, a story of like darkness to light. And I've never really looked back. The Lord has just been really my Father from that point on. And then, as testimonies go, there isn't always just one life change that happens, right? That's just the beginning of the renovation that happens. And so, for the rest of my adulthood, I feel like I've just been a work in progress in terms of the Lord just continuing to draw me in, teach me new things, reveal himself to me. But it all began from a little place called Kanakuk.
I've heard that many times. I heard about that camp growing up in Kansas City, and I've never actually went, but I've heard of many, many people say many good things about it. But I am curious, if your parents weren't taking you to church, maybe not as religious or maybe not as Christian, why did they send you to that camp?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an amazing story. It's only the Lord, right? Like, I had a dance teacher. I was in dance and she had been a counselor there. And I think that my parents thought, it's a great opportunity for us to get a couple weeks off, this summer. And she seems like she would like to go. So there wasn't really a desire for like the spiritual nurturing, I don't think, from them at that point. But it was more just the Lord just had his hand on the trajectory of my life and said, you're just going to go to this camp. I don't know. It's wild, but yeah.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how it's it can be hard to understand the ways of our Father in the middle of whatever you're going through. But it's not until afterwards that you look back, hindsight's 20/20, of how clear and how incredible his ways kind of work together to help us follow his will.
Yeah.
And get into that place we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have pulled myself out of the desert that I was in. I mean, he literally had a plan for me to know him. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So tell me more about Screen Sanity.
Oh yeah. So Screen Sanity is, it's a nonprofit. We help families navigate the digital world. So we really equip parents to be mentors and guides to their kids in an increasingly digital world. And our story kind of started about 5 years ago. And I was just thinking back about where I was 5 years ago. And I was remembering that my kids were enrolled here at Coma. And during that season, my oldest daughter was in 5th grade And I remember the hot Christmas gift that year was a smartphone. And with your first child, you always kind of go into this pattern of, I don't know what to do about this new milestone. So I'll do what I always do, which is go to the parents one step ahead of me. And I'll ask them, how do I get them to sleep through the night? How do I, whatever it is. And kind of expected them to say, just, give her the phone. It's going to be fine. You'll survive. Just get through it. But instead, as I started having those conversations with parents a step ahead of me, it was a very different reaction than what I expected. It was more of the eyes kind of went downcast and kind of the body kind of backed up. And it was more like, I don't have an answer for you on this one because it's not going well at my house. But if you can do anything differently than we've done, please do it by all means, because it's taken us by surprise. And so that very different reaction really compelled me to just try to figure out a better path forward for our family in terms of introducing a smartphone to our daughter. Part of that conversation was actually birthed in the wait until 8th conversation. Do you remember that conversation at all?
Wait until
8th is a movement that invites families to ask other families in your own community to wait together to give your kid a smartphone until 8th grade. And so that was kind of an amazing tool to spark a conversation in Kansas City about what does it look like to not just, assume that our children are ready for, the digital world at a young age. But what ended up happening with that conversation was that as I began to kind of share that concept with families, I really began to learn that conversation was the wrong conversation, because what it meant was not every family could come to the table. Maybe families had already given their kid a smartphone. Maybe families had, different family structures that needed access to a phone, and that it was the wrong conversation. And instead, the conversation really needed to be, rather than what age is the right age to give the kid a smartphone, it really needed to be, how are we preparing them for the digital world? What is the incremental roadmap and pathway that we can take to raise kids who are happy and healthy in a digital world? And so as I have two co-founders, Tracy Foster and Brenda Walden, and as we began to have these conversations with communities in Kansas City, we really began to realize that while there was not a roadmap for kids entering the digital world, that there were people who were brave enough to come forward and share their stories about the mistakes that they had made and the lessons that they had learned, that we could create new wisdom together. And so while we are the first generation of we are the first generation of parents raising kids who are digital natives, right? We can't call our parents or our grandparents to ask them for advice, right? There's no wisdom being handed down through the ages, but we are the wisdom makers. And so we really began to rally around just these community conversations that said, hey, it's not going well. Maya Angelou is known for saying, what is it? When I didn't, I'll mess it up, but she says something like, when I didn't know, I didn't know, but now that I know better, I can do better. And that's kind of the baseline for our conversations. And so, one of the things we did was we thought, okay, surely there's like a Dave Ramsey course out there for this.
Seems like there is for everything.
Yeah. And so we thought we can probably just outsource this thing and find somebody who already has the curriculum that families could go through to have these conversations. But as we really looked around the country, we couldn't find anything. And what we realized was probably that we need to be the ones to develop that and start figuring out ways to get that to as many families as possible. And so that is how Screen Sanity was born. It is a God story, day after day of him throwing open doors that we could have never predicted or forced to have open. It's a story of, honestly, those early conversations were just so scary for me, because I think anytime you enter into, especially parenting topics, but a parenting topic that is affecting us all, and that we all have some kind of shame or hurt around, I knew that there was a chance I was going to lose friends, community. I knew that starting this conversation could accidentally put me on an island, right? Where I was the only person and where I walked around with some kind of like scarlet letter around Kansas City where people are like, there's the smartphone, and not the smartphone lady. And not only me, right? But also my kids then also had to bear that, where it was like, oh, your mom is the one who is like telling my mom that I'm not supposed to get a smartphone. So there have been so many moments where it has just been all about trusting that even though I'm scared, that instead of looking to the fear, looking to God's faithfulness and what he'd done so far. And the truth is that while the conversation really felt scary to me 5 years ago, I would strongly say there's been 0% pushback on the conversation. 0%. What I have learned, I really expected everybody to say, you're judging me, you think you're better than me, all of this stuff. And instead, what I found is so much unity and so many parents coming together to say, yeah, this is hurting me too. And we have more in common than we do different. We all want our kids to be healthy. We all want our kids to be happy. And how can we get on the same page? And how can we create new norms and a new reality for our kids rather than just kind of throw our hands in the air and, abdicate our role as parents? And so it has been, there's story after story throughout all the conversations we've had where it has blown me away, just kind of looking back at the Ebenezer's of the ways that the Lord has really just brought more and more people into the conversation rather than creating division and shame around it. So
how are you guys helping or serving parents through Screen Sanity? What does that look like?
Yeah. So our signature program is called Screen Sanity. And it is, in the program, what we do is we educate parents around kind of 5 key principles of what we call digital health. And then what we do is we give them an opportunity to talk with each other about, what stuck out with them, what they want to do to try just one little tiny thing to tweak in their home. So really it's not just about like giving parents a fire hose of information, right? They can go out and they can search on the internet and they can get all the information they want. And that is helpful. But really our program is designed for face-to-face conversations because we believe that even more than just the fire hose of information, we need to lock eyes with other people to say, I will be here for you. And if you're feeling something, if you're concerned about something, let's say that you and I both have kids who are, going to school together, and I'm hosting a slumber party, and you're not sure if you can send your kid to my house because you don't know what we do around, you don't know if we have filters on our devices. You don't know what the kids are going to do with their phones at night. But really, if we've had a conversation ahead of time that says being healthy and having healthy norms in the digital world is important to us as a community, it makes it that much easier for you to say, hey, what's your plan for checking in phones that night? And so really our whole thing is trying to build community around the concept of digital health and supporting parents toward a community approach toward it.
So are you guys just meeting with moms? Are you then providing a framework?
Yeah. So, in our early development phase, we were really on the ground in rooms with moms a lot. It's really with moms and dads, just having these conversations. But what we've been able to produce is we have a group study that has video guided discussions. So you can play a video, and then if you have like a small group, or you have a book club or some kind of PTO group or anything like that, you can bring our curriculum and push play on the video and then react to the video together within your own context of leadership. So, and In addition to that, then for ongoing support for families, we have all kinds of resources around specific needs. So when your child is ready to start entering into the world of social media, we have an amazing social media playbook. That is, I should have brought one today, but it is a workbook that you can sit down with your kid and it asks them questions to help them go into that world intentionally, right? To not just accidentally drop them into the deep end, but to give them some kind of sense of, okay, who do I want to show up as on the online world? What are my boundaries going to be? What am I going to do on my days on social media when my emotions get triggered? How am I going to resolve those things? How am I going to take care of myself, my mental health in the digital world? So the social media playbook is a tool that's designed to help a parent and a child have those conversations as the child enters into the digital world. Or maybe you're a family who is struggling with video games. We have an amazing free downloadable resource on our website called the Video Game Decision Tree. There's also a podcast that you can listen to with neurotherapist Susan Dunaway, who helped develop the tool. But it's basically saying, like, rather than saying to your kid, you can be on a screen this number many of minutes, and then kind of dealing with like the tantrums and the meltdowns that come when you just yank that game away from them. Instead, it sets up, it's a visual decision tree that basically says the best number of screen time minutes for your kid, like with gaming, video gaming, is the number of minutes at which they can calmly put the device down and walk away without behavior change. Once you've started recognizing your child having a meltdown or having some kind of behavior change, that's how you know you've gone past their limit that their brain can handle in terms of stimulation. And so you as a family are working on trying to help that child identify for himself or herself what their limits are so that they don't get overstimulated, and then being able to self-regulate, put the game away and walk away, have the discipline to walk away without a meltdown. And if you're unable to do that, then the next time you just lower the amount of minutes, right? Or if you are able to do that, then you want them to eventually get to the point where they are setting their own timers, right? And that they are then staying in charge of that video game. Because unfortunately, what we do hear from a lot of families who haven't had the chance to really develop self-regulation skills around screen time is that these kids they'll do an amazing job in high school, they'll go to college, and they won't make it through their freshman year because they haven't learned how to regulate those video games. Mm-hmm. And if we aren't able to equip them, help them understand that the addictive properties that are built into a lot of our games, then we're kind of setting them up to fail when it goes to college, when they leave our household, I guess.
So going off of that, I mean, I have so many questions because I have a 10-year-old daughter and son, twins, who love their iPads.
Yep.
And we've tried the whole time limit thing. Yeah. But then life gets crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And they bring it to you.
Yep.
And you're right in the middle of something.
Right.
And you're like, okay, I'll give you 10 more minutes or whatever. Then they start understanding how to play that game.
Yeah, I understand. We have that at our house too.
When is dad or mom busy so that I can give that iPad to him because then I know that she's or he's going to go, here you get 10 more minutes.
Yeah, totally.
They're so smart with that. Uh-huh. We tried this thing with our kind of a game with our daughter. And it was like a coin game where they basically, not even a game, it's like every week we give you 14 coins. Yeah. And each one is worth 30 minutes of iPad time.
Okay.
And then she got to use those coins either for iPad screen time or for other things.
Oh, nice.
And it worked for about a month.
Yeah.
But honestly, we've seen a huge decrease in her iPad dependence. And now she doesn't really need the coins. She just kind of does it on her own. Yeah. But I think it's really helped. And I really loved what you said earlier of helping them learn how to set the timers for themselves. Yeah. And just that self-regulation. Right. Because as we all know, even as adults, first off, these things are addictive. Mm-hmm. I was at the playground with my kids the other day, and I saw a boy who was probably 12. He comes up on his bike, and he literally puts his bike to the side and lays down on the playground.
Oh, no.
Lays flat on his back with his phone up in front of his face for 30 to 60 minutes.
Right.
I'm thinking, why did you have to come to the playground to do that?
I know it.
But it just shows the addictiveness of these things. So with your program, this is something people could watch videos on, and then they can do a group discussion, because that discussion is probably very important.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, how much is too much screen time for a child?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. There's definitely a ton of research, right? Just now surfacing around the effect that screens are really having. Even like, I think, well, I'm not even going to quote it, but I did see one of the first longitudinal studies on children who had been on a certain amount of screens since infancy. I think it was like an 8-year thing, and then it looked at the brain imaging. And so we're still trying to understand, right? This stuff is still so new, raising kids in the digital world. But it really, what we try to help parents think of is, rather than the recommendations, right? So the recommendations change constantly. So you talked about COVID, right? You think about COVID, like it was like before, or maybe you didn't talk about COVID. Maybe that was before we were on. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
But if you think about COVID beforehand, I think, we had kind of some kind of guidelines about like the number of minutes your child should be on a screen. And then when COVID hit, it was like, okay, those rules are out the window.
Because we got to do school on COVID.
We're going to be on screens all the time. And really what that season, I think, did for us was in a lot of ways clarify that actually it's not the number of screen time minutes that you're on a screen. It's the type of activities that you're doing on a screen that we really need to be looking at. So rather than trying to like hit that, that 120-minute goal every day or whatever it is, instead of that, if we can start helping our kids think about screen time qualitatively rather than quantitatively. So we talk with families about helping our kids choose screen time where you create or you consume. Where you create or you connect more than you consume. So apps like for creating, okay, apps like Roblox even, right? You're building, you're constructing something. Maybe you have an architectural app, or maybe you have like an app where you're learning music or you're learning to cook. Those things all push you to use a different part of your brain than the side of your brain that's just kind of eating and digesting information. When it comes to connection, apps like Zoom or FaceTime, or even I would say apps like Marco Polo, they provide this idea of serve and return, or kind of like a tennis match between people where there's a back and forth conversation. And we like to teach, I teach my kids, we always want to have tennis match conversations whenever we're talking with people in the real world, but also online, because what happens when you have attunement with another person, when you have real connection, is that your brain actually does this incredible thing. It releases the hormone oxytocin. And if you don't know what oxytocin is, it actually acts like a Pac-Man in your body. When you connect with somebody else, whether it's through a hug, a back and forth conversation, it releases oxytocin, and this little Pac-Man goes throughout your body and it eats up the hormone cortisol. And cortisol is the hormone that's caused by stress. So in a way, these back and forth conversations are really the antidote to a lot of the mental health stress that we are facing.
Depression, anxiety, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So we can teach our kids to really look for opportunities to create and connect rather than just consume. Because when we are consuming online, those one directional pieces of information, or even like messages that are coming at us just one directionally. If you think about social media, it feeds off of this idea that like I can put something out into the world, but that I'm not necessarily going to get anything back, right? And those kinds of things can create a ton of like internal stress, whereas screen time that you're using, to mimic, God's design for us, honestly, to be attuned people living in community. Those are really the types of screen time that we want to look for.
Because we were created to be social, to be in tribes, to be in groups,
That's right.
to interact, to spread the good news, to talk to people, right? All of those things are within our code and our DNA. But when we stop doing those things that we were created and called to do, then there's consequences.
Right. Yeah. I've really started thinking about even the way that Jesus modeled that for us with, there wasn't social media, when he was here, but, he really did have a couple of different platforms, right? He was able to speak to multitudes, to crowds, in a way that a lot of people, historically have not been able to do. But really what he prioritized was his group of 12 disciples.
Right. And even his three. Peter, James, John is his three that he was really close with.
Right. And so really when you look at the way that God designed us, like we do have a capacity, right? We do have a capacity for social relationships. We're limited by our time, and we're limited by, honestly, our brain size. We are just limited creatures. And I think sometimes what the digital world accidentally does is it tries to lie to us and make us think that like we can have more power or influence over things that are outside of our actual God-given capacity.
I never thought of that. I love that, because we can, without digital media, without digital communication, how many people can you actually talk to?
Right.
Not that, a lot, but really not as compared to the digital format. You could have a group chat, you could have social media going back and forth on comments or likes or whatever.
Right.
Now it's like infinite. And it's overwhelming. Right. And it fries our brains.
Right. And there's a time and a place, I think, to use those digital platforms for influence or for, especially so I actually published a book around Christmas time called Well Framed. And one of the principles that I teach on in that book is just around this idea of capacity, but also just kind of helping articulate what is our purpose for being online. And sometimes we are online to perform. We are online to, I call it a front porch situation, right? So if you think about a house, right, there's all different kinds of rooms in a house, and each of them have a different purpose. And when on your front porch, you're kind of interacting with whoever wants to come by. It could be, it could be the UPS guy. It could be anybody. It could be strangers. It could be people you don't know at all. But outside of your house in general, you're not going to stand on your front porch and have a deep conversation or reveal any need that you have or anything that is super personal or expose yourself on your front porch. When you have trust with somebody, you invite them into your house, right? And then you have those conversations in your family room. And so really one of the things I try to help my kids think through is, are you using digital media as a front porch where you're just giving light, surface level information? Maybe it's about a business that you're building, or maybe it's about some kind of ministry or whatever. And then, or are you intending for it to be used as a family room? And if it is going to be used as a family room, then how can we create the boundaries that you need to make sure that the people who are following you are people you trust, people you know, a smaller group of people. We don't want a crowd in our family room. People who are going to reciprocate and have attunement with your story. How are we making sure that we kind of know what our purpose is in the digital world? Because just like Jesus, right? Like there were times when he needed to be able to share things with a large crowd. And then there were times where he really intentionally poured in the deep with people who are close to him. And so I think that's a really challenging model for us. And I'm just curious about it. That when Jesus walked this earth, he knew that this was coming. That blows my mind, right? That he knew that we would be here in 2023 and we would be facing the challenges that we're facing today. And so my question that I keep leaning into, does his wisdom still stand? Does his model still stand? And if I believe that he's sovereign over everything, if I believe that he's working to redeem everything, if I believe that he is in the details, then the answer is yes. Right? And so it's, okay, Jesus, how does your model apply to the challenges we're facing today with our own digital lives, with raising kids in the digital world?
Yeah.
How can we integrate that?
So you're saying maybe that people will, even obviously kids too, but they're on social media saying things that they would say in the family room, but they're saying it on the porch to everybody else.
That's right.
And they probably should think about that a little bit more.
Right.
And really just talk to those people who they trust in their family room that they would actually pull into their family room.
Yeah.
Then they can have those really candid, deep conversations.
Right.
And not blasting it out to everybody.
Right. Because I think the consequences when we blast it to everybody, right? The consequences, there's a relational miss that happens.
Right.
So if we think of, as we were talking about the back and forth, the tennis ball match, right? It's like I've served 1,000 tennis balls to 1,000 people and I've been met back with silence. There's 1,000 balls that I've thrown out to people who haven't caught them and they don't care. Right? But if I can serve them to my 5, to my 10, to my 20 people who know me, who can genuinely say, you know, gosh, I'm here for you, or I'm praying for you, or whatever, then that's a relational catch.
That is, that's really good, because I think a lot of kids, especially nowadays, I can't even imagine, by the way, growing up in this.
No, I can't even.
I mean, you and I probably remember the days of dial-up. AOL was starting to come about. I think I was, I was 10, maybe 11.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest, craziest thing ever. Other than that, the only screen time I had was watching Saved by the Bell and Full House on TV. And most Fresh Prince. Oh my goodness. I used to binge watch that stuff after school.
My daughter was rapping that with me in the car today on the way to school. It's kind of retro coming back.
Isn't that hilarious? It's like the 90s are coming back. I'm like, please leave the 90s in the 90s. Why are we trying to bring that back?
Yeah.
But anyways, with social media, I wrestle with this question with my kids, and really just in general with adults. Why do we even need to be on it? I can't honestly think, other than if you have a business, that's my purpose with social media. It's so powerful for business.
For sure. Yeah.
Other than that.
Yeah. Do we think, I mean, I think this is a great question. And actually, I'll tell you, about a year ago, I don't know if you have this book up here. Do you have Atomic Habits up here?
No, but I am very aware of it. That's a good one.
Yeah. So James Clear, right? So he talks about the power of just the tiny changes you can make in your life that will make huge differences in your life. And I remember I was listening to a podcast with him talking about it and feeling like just kind of ucky, like so much of my time was being consumed by checking my social media feed. And so I actually thought, you know what, I'm just going to do an experiment. I'm going to delete Instagram. I'm going to delete Instagram today. And so I did that. And I will tell you, my thumb remembered where my Instagram button was for 3 weeks.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
That's why Facebook or Meta is a multi-billion-dollar company, because they are a psychological company that knows how to play to your psychological wirings for then you to continue to click, so then they can sell more ads to you.
Right.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Right. So even I was thinking about that this week, because the American Psychological Association came out this I think it was this week. I'm sorry, I don't know when this will be published, but this spring they came out with a health advisory actually for adolescents who are using social media. And I started thinking about a lot of times when I work with schools or organizations, they're like, okay, but what kinds of social media really are you talking about that are bad? And I think it is important for us to say that some types of social media are actually, that not all social media is created equal, that some are like Meta, where they do include these kind of ingredients, these like secret ingredients, right? It's kind of like you think back about like, the Big Mac and McDonald's and
talk about addictive.
Yeah. And we were kind of just all eating that food, but we didn't really know that there was a secret sauce that was being put in behind the scenes. And I think that is the truth with a lot of these apps today, that they are being designed to be addictive. But can you imagine a world, and I think this is part of the role we get to play as believers, where social media is more organic and it is more designed to help foster and support the actual human needs and human connections that God, gave us to have. And so what I've noticed is that I use Marco Polo a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't have ads.
Right.
And so guess who gets to stay in charge of the conversation? Me.
Yeah.
And so I think what I would love to start seeing in the digital world is for us to start really thinking about some social media could be okay. It's just the types of social media that have those kind of addictive things built into them. So starting to be able to educate our kids around the differences between kind of the organic aisle of the social media world versus the, the fast food, the Big Mac or whatever. And so yeah, because we do want to be able to say that we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle, right? We do want to be able to use social media for our businesses and even for just genuine human connection.
Family.
Yeah, for our family.
I know. If it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't know anything going on with my extended family.
Right. Same.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in that. And maybe it's just figuring out how to first discipline yourself so then you are in control.
Yeah.
And trying to keep that ratio high of either being a producer or a content producer as opposed to a content digester.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not having it flipped where you're digesting much more than you're actually producing.
Right.
And even if you're not producing, then it's just how do you minimize that as much as possible? One of the things that I think is very powerful, even on Facebook, and I think you can do this on Instagram too, but unfollowing people, right?
Yeah.
So having those connections on Facebook still, but then no offense to them, but I just unfollow because a lot of the stuff that they're posting is just not relevant to me.
Right.
And it's more relevant to their family.
Right.
Well, I don't need to be in that conversation. I don't need to be in that family room because I'm not supposed to be there.
That's right.
So that's just I unfollow, but then I still stay connected in case they want to reach out and have a conversation. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's really helped me just detach because it can be addictive.
Yeah.
Especially if you like to socialize with people, kind of see what's going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for my 10-year-old daughter, I'm always wrestling with this question of if, and if it's yes, meaning if, do we allow her to get on social media?
Yeah.
Next question is when.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't even want her at all on until she moves out and she decides that on her own.
Yeah. I would love to share a personal story about that.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. So Signy, if you're listening, my daughter, I'm going to ask you for forgiveness rather than permission, and pray that God's grace. So she's 16.
Sure.
And she has walked the road of not having social media. That's not the road that works for every family. And I'm not saying that that's what it should be or it has to be. I do think the Surgeon General now has said that 13 is too young for the developing brains to be able to be on social media.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
But with Signy, she's my guinea pig. She's had to kind of walk this road anyway. And so I have just said, hey, we're not even going to talk about it until you're 16. And she has, what has been interesting is as we've gone through 13, 14, 15, she has had so much up close and personal experience with friends who have just been so beat up by the whole social media world. So the thing that I've had to wrestle with as a parent is that I can protect my own kid from having social media or from the bumps and the bruises of the digital world as much as I want, but she is still carrying the weight of a generation that is constantly getting beat up by this thing. And so whether I want to take the whole burden away from her or not, I can't. And so she has had to still walk through with her friends who are on social media, all of the things that they've experienced. And as we got closer to 16, she kind of had this moment where she was like, "Hey, Mom, this isn't cool anymore."
Social media?
No, me not letting her have it. And I was like, man, and she's like, I do everything so well. Like, she's like, I make good grades. I'm really active at school. I'm the only kid who's not on social media. Can I just Can I just have one social media app? And selfishly, and this is maybe not how I would do it again, but this is just how I did it. I was like, can you just make it to 16? Because you've got 3 younger siblings and you're setting a precedent here. And I just don't know that I would. And so for the last 2 months, I actually paid her. I said, how about if I pay you each month to stay off social media? Will you stay off until 16? And when you turn 16, we're going to start with one app. We're going to do it together. We're going to have conversations about this. By the way, teenagers love having conversations with you about their social. No, they do not.
Right.
You know what I mean? She's like, oh my gosh. But in those 2 months, what we did was we rewatched The Social Dilemma together. Mm-hmm. And I think she saw it with a totally different lens than she'd seen it before. I think she began to understand that, okay, wait, this is actually like I'm the product and I'm going to get manipulated. Mm-hmm. She ramped up her Marco Polo game. So I was on a vacation with her, and the whole time she was almost like Snapchatting to a friend back home using Marco Polo. Mm-hmm. But it was the family room situation. It was filling up her social need. Right. She also has kind of gone through the ringer with like the whole FOMO thing, where it's kind of like, well, I'm not that. I mean, I've kind of been left out of everything already. that kind of fizzled.
The train's already left.
Yeah. She's like, I'm already left out. I already know what it feels like. But then when she turned 16, I was like, all right, we made it. So I went up to her room and I said, which social media app do you want to start with? And she said, I don't know that I'm going to do it.
Wow. Good for her.
So I think, and that's good for her because she's an awesome kid. And I don't want to downplay that. I also think 16 brain is different than 12 brain and 10 brain. She's had the time to watch the side effects firsthand. She's had time for that prefrontal cortex to come just a little bit further over, her brain that would make impulsive decisions. And now she's able to come into the conversation from a different angle of like, yeah, I actually could be on social media if I wanted to, but I'm going to make an exchange, right? And I know the exchange now that I'm going to make if I'm on it.
So what if you did this? Maybe here's an idea. Almost treat it like a business. So yeah, hey, you want to go into social media? That's what you want to do. Like you're wanting to sell this, you want to start this business. I need a business plan.
Totally.
What's the objective? What are you trying to accomplish being on social media?
Yes.
And what are the operational procedures? How long are you going to be on it? And ultimately, you got to sell me on why the objective is actually something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because if it's just you want to somehow keep up with what your friends are doing and that's it. I mean, text them.
Right.
You can text them.
Right.
I'm assuming she has a phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
So text them and how about you have conversations, go have coffee with them.
Right.
Other than that, if you just want to keep up, I need something more than that.
Right.
If you want to start an actual business.
Totally. Let's do it.
Let's do that.
I know
I'm in full support.
Me too.
Let's do the YouTube channel.
Yep.
Let's do Instagram, even TikTok, but we got to be very safe on there because that also can be very manipulative and some negative things on there. But for me, if my daughter asked me, I'd say, well, you got to sell me on the objective here.
Yeah, totally. And what you're articulating is really what we teach at Screen Sanity, which is this driver's ed approach, right? So when our kids turn 16, we don't just hand them the keys to a brand new car and wish them luck on a highway, right? Instead, we have a gradual process of training where we actually, what do? We sit next to them in the passenger seat, coaching them, pointing out hazards, having conversations with them with the goal, not to hold them back from driving forever, with the goal that we want them to move forward into this adulthood with independence and safety and security, and that they would be able to navigate that in a self-regulated way. And so that is really an approach that we do recommend for parents, whatever age you do enter into the social media world, that you plan to spend some hours logging time side by side with them. And that you don't just turn it over to them fully, that maybe you start with a more limited approach. So let's say that you want to make a business account, or maybe it's just even something more simple like a family pet account, right? Where you guys you decide our dog's name is Chip. we're going to make Chip his own little pet Instagram. And
oh my goodness. Those things I've seen tens of thousands of followers for these pets.
I know they are fun to look at. Yeah. But it's an awesome opportunity for you to actually coach them, right? To sit in the driver's seat. And I love what you articulated with, hey, you want to be on social media? Let's use that with purpose. Let's use that to grow new muscles in you. Let's use that as a building block that will help you be successful for the rest of your life.
Even here at Coma, that's really the foundation that I've learned with teaching kids is you can't force anybody, really, kid or adult, to do anything.
Right.
It all comes back to that intrinsic motivation, them choosing on their own. And that, in my opinion, and from my experience, starts with having that conversation, two-way conversation, not just one way where we're just telling them what to do.
Right.
And being able to ask those correct questions. And also them knowing that you're on their side.
Yes.
But this has to make sense to me.
Right.
You can't, you don't want me to tell you what to do.
Right.
But then you can't expect for you to be able to tell me what to do.
Right.
Right. So it's got to be a win-win situation.
Totally.
So what age do you think is appropriate for a child to get a cell phone?
For a smartphone? Well, the interesting thing is, I think there are there's a blossoming market right now with pre-smartphone alternatives.
Yeah.
And so, we see a lot of families choosing smartwatches in the elementary years where they can, have limited access to connect with parents, but not the whole world. We see a lot of families choosing first phones now. So those are your Gab phones, your Pinwheel phones, your True-Me phones. I see a lot of that happening around 6th grade. And the beauty of those phones is that they do allow you to do that driver's ed process where, like, for example, my kids get a first phone in 6th grade and they can only have one-to-one texting for a year.
That's good.
Before then, in 7th grade, they get to have group texting. Well, group texting is its own beast, right?
That's just your own social media.
Oh my gosh.
You're making your own news feed.
It is a whole onion to peel. I'm just telling you. And then, in 8th grade, they get to add photo texting. So you're giving them one skill at a time. And so really that's, I guess, maybe not to avoid your question altogether, but it's less about what age is the right age and more about like, what is the developmentally appropriate device for what your family needs at this moment. And then how can we work toward having a kid who knows how to use a smartphone before they leave your house at age 18 or whatever, So.
So my daughter, she has an Apple Watch and it's the cellular version so she can have access wherever. And the reason why we got this, because she was dealing with anxiety, separation anxiety.
Yeah.
And she would just have this almost panic attack when we were 1 minute late.
Yeah.
Right? 1 minute late, heaven forbid. We forgot about you. So then we said, well, how about, and she was asking for an Apple Watch. We're like, all right, if we try this Apple Watch, let's see if it's going to help you feel a little bit more secure that you can text us.
Yeah.
Say, where are you? And we can text her, hey, I'm 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
And have that communication.
Yeah.
I think overall that's been a really good move. And honestly, she forgets this thing all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did I buy this? You don't even wear it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, for me, the way I'm seeing this, teaching so many kids, talking to so many parents, there's a spectrum like in anything else.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the lockdown, where you're really trying to protect every single little thing that might harm your child.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have the complete freedom, where it's like, hey, they're gonna eventually be on the phone, so let's just get it over with.
Right.
They're 10 years old. Throw it to them.
Right.
Let's see what happens. They will learn their lesson on their own.
Right.
I don't think either side is correct.
Right.
You got to find that nice balance specifically for your child, because every single child is uniquely created with their own challenges, their own strengths, their own weaknesses.
Right.
And starting from there.
Right.
So I don't think there's a blanketed approach for every single child.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And think about a maturity level, just comparing a girl to a boy.
Yeah.
Girls are 10 years ahead.
Well, yes.
Boys or males, we never grow up. I always joke, look at the stupid things we laugh at. Well, you can ask my wife. She's just always rolling her eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, I think it really comes back to using your best judgment. But ultimately, what I'm starting to see here is even if we go back to Atomic Habits, I'm a huge, I've never really read about it. I read it, but I know the bullet points.
Yeah.
And I'm such a fan and I'm so supportive of this because it's changed my life and my own personal life of adding those little tiny habits.
Yes.
Now it has made me become quote unquote a disciplined person, but discipline is a myth.
Right.
Parents need to do this.
Yeah.
Because children will only grow up in ways that the parent kind of guides them. Now we're not going to force them, but we have to be the guide.
Right.
But if we're not disciplined and if we don't have follow-up, we're not consistent, then how on earth are we going to expect our child to then be that person that we're trying to help them create?
Yeah.
I think it starts with us, parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
YouTube Kids app. My son and daughter are obsessed.
Yeah.
I swear to you, I've heard the same video.
Yeah.
And it has to be some Mickey Mouse video that has dubbed over Russian or maybe Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I hear over and over in the morning.
It's amazing.
Gosh.
YouTube Kids.
Yeah. Is that a safe app?
I mean, I think going back to what you were just talking about with safety versus independence, I just think it probably depends on how you define safety. We do recommend at Screen Sanity that you use gated sources, especially for younger kids, rather than putting them on like YouTube at large, or that you might put them on PBS Kids or something with more limited options. The thing with YouTube Kids is that even though it is monitored for content, that it is still algorithm driven. And so it is still going to suggest things for your child and keep them entertained. And so it is more safe than just full-blown YouTube.
Yeah.
And yet it is still a force working in your kid's life to take them a direction that advertisers are paying for them to go. And so that's the exchange you get to choose as a parent. And I think parents all fall in different places on that. But there are constant porn bots and all kinds of catfishing that can make its way into YouTube Kids, just because even as fast as filters are working to update, right. They just can't keep up with everything. There's no way. The web is just so rapidly developing. So, and there aren't really filters that can work within the YouTube Kids app that I'm aware of, unless you're watching it from within, like, I don't know, like, I think there's a service called VidAngel where you can watch other, you can stream shows through VidAngel and it helps edit content. But I guess it kind of depends on what your definition of safety is and what your goals are as a parent.
I've tried VidAngel and I think it's a really good app.
Have you?
Oh, yeah. Because there's a lot of movies that I want to watch, but I just don't want to hear the vulgar language and obviously a lot of the, inappropriate content.
Yeah.
But it does a good job of taking it all out. But when you start watching movies where half of it's that,
I know
it's pointless to watch the movie because you don't even know what's going on.
I know
because they take out huge chunks of the movie.
I think that's why I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, but I definitely think there are a lot of movies out there that maybe have a little bit of vulgar language, and you can still get the whole movie in its entirety and even after they take out some of the inappropriate language. So on the YouTube Kids app, one of the things I'll do, especially those repeating videos that just drive me insane, I'm like, all right, we've hit our 100 play limit. You go in there, you hit those 3 dots, and you can put "Don't show again."
Oh, nice,
yeah,
good.
So then at least you don't have to hear the the Russian Mickey Mouse. I have to ask, do you remember why you had your children in martial arts? I have to, put that question in there.
Yeah, well, actually, I think it's really related to this. I think we're raising kids in a world that is hyper performative. And so when our kids were younger, we kind of tried all of the different we explored everything. We gave our kids a chance to try soccer and baseball and basketball and dance and all of these different things. But I think we got pretty quickly worn out with the I guess what I would describe it as looking to the side rather than looking within. And so I think in a lot of the situations that we were in, especially with like kind of some of the sports teams that we ended up being involved in. And I know that not all sports teams are this way, but it ended up being more about the parents than it did the kids. And really it felt more like we were just kind of corralling our kids for some kind of like, for our family, for some kind of goal that wasn't really authentic to us. And really what was authentic to me was knowing that you only get them as children once. You only have this chance to shape their internal character once. And so we were really looking for opportunities for them to shift their focus from the competition and all of the other things to more like internal development and discipline and just being able to be able to build character. And so really we found that in martial arts, just the discipline, the consistency, the respect, the ability to, oh my gosh, just something recently, I was talking to a coach and they were just sharing how discouraged, it was a 7th grade basketball coach. And they were saying, so discouraging coaching these kids because, only a few of them are even able to receive coaching. Even only a few of them are able to even be curious about ways that they could improve themselves because they're so used to kind of running the show. But really with martial arts, there's this built in, and you could probably articulate it better than me because I was just kind of as much of a student as they were. I mean, I feel like I learned through the whole experience, but watching them be able to learn submission and respect for their master and really being able to give, respect to somebody who was able to give them wisdom, was able to help them grow better and stronger. That to me was every cent was worth it here. Just being able to give them the opportunity to grow as people, mind and body. And so, we love it. And they've used that foundation to transition into, our daughter. Now she's an amazing ballerina. She is totally. And so it's a different kind of art, right? But she has the discipline, and it's not about, it's really all about strength and all about grace and all about, really showing up as her best self on the dance floor, and less about how does my mom think I performed on that game or something like that. So it's an amazing opportunity.
I think you hit it on the head there. And I actually made a video about this.
Yeah.
And I think it was more along the lines of, will martial arts make my child more aggressive?
Oh.
And I could also talk about this and how is martial arts different than other team sports? And I would say the biggest difference is internal versus external focus. So with team sports, there's always this external focus of we have to beat the competition. We have to win. We have to do things. We have to create strategies in order to then overcome our opponents.
Right.
But in martial arts, specifically the way we teach Taekwondo here, it's all about internal. Yeah. So the finger is pointing inwards on how can I essentially beat myself.
Right.
Overcome my weaknesses, overcome my insecurities, so then I can learn how to learn. Yep. I can be coachable. Yep. Because if you cannot receive feedback in life, you are going to have a difficult time on this planet. That's right. Because feedback is the only way that we can improve and get better and grow. Right. But a lot of times a lot of kids will miss out on that in their youth. Right. And then when they become adults, their boss says, "Hey, you're not hitting the mark." And then they go in the corner and cry. Right. Or they just shut down. And they just quit and go to a different job and they job hop. Right. Well, 10 years later, you've had 10 jobs. Right. You're not hireable anymore. Nobody wants to hire somebody like that. Right. Because it's just no commitment. Right. So that's why we're still in business 17 years later, is we're always focusing on helping that child learn how to learn and really receive that feedback, no matter how difficult that is. Yeah. And how different, just in light of our conversation today, how different is it to receive feedback from somebody who's attuned to you rather than like the world that they are growing up in? If we don't step in, if we are not intentional about that, our kids are receiving feedback constantly. And the types of feedback that they're receiving is all about them not having any control over, them feeling less than, not enough, not having that, what do you call it? The locus of control to be able to say,
actually, yeah, I might be less than right now, but I actually could take a step to improve that. And I can do that in the safety of this human relationship, of this coach who cares about me and who actually can give me the roadmap that I need to take to get to the next level. So I think, martial arts is an amazing opportunity. It's an antidote, right, to the type of world that our kids are actually growing up in.
I could just talk about this stuff for another hour.
Well, thanks for having me
Unfortunately,
today.
we're out of time.
Yeah.
How can people parents find out more about your organization, Screen Sanity?
Yeah, you just screensanity.org is our website, and you can access all kinds of free resources there. You can grab our books off of Amazon, and we look forward to serving you in any way we can.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yep, thanks for having me.